talk about bees, but not beekeeping. I became aware about 4 or 5 years ago, as probably all of you have done as well, that there is a lot of stuff going on out there. There is a decline in bees. But when I started looking into this, what alarmed me is that it seems everything, the whole focus, seems to be on the honeybees. And the focus is on the honeybees because they have economic value. So that right from the beginning disturbed me, the fact that this whole issue seems to be about money. Now, I've spent the last 3 years doing very little other than reading about and watching bees. It's become an obsession, so I'm besotted. I had to. But I've learned so much, and what started out for me as just an issue that I thought was affecting humanity has turned into a personal journey where I've just become closer and closer to the bees, and through the bees I've learned so much, and I've kind of I'm on my own little journey to reconnect with nature, which I think is what we all should be doing, and you know, it is our disconnection from nature that has put us into the situation that we're in today. I think that's just my opinion. So I've got an hour. I could talk to you for an hour about one species of bumblebee. So given the fact that there are 200,000 species of bee in the world, in the UK we have one species of honeybee and a few subspecies. We have 24 bumblebees, and we have 220 different species of solitary bee. So, and people don't know they exist. Lots of people think honeybees, bumblebees, but there's so much more to it than that. Bees have evolved over the last 200 million years in tandem with flowers. You know, they are our pollinators, they are our main pollinators. They have this incredible, and always have had this incredible symbiotic relationship with the flowers that they pollinate. They were once wasps. They started with wasps, and then what happened is a few of the wasps became specialists, so that they had a certain plant, and then they sort of broke off and became our first solitary bees. Bees they're not highly evolved enough to live in a colony, but they are still bees. And then some of these bees became more highly evolved, and we ended up with bumblebees. I'm really generalising here. And then if you're looking at the most highly evolved species, or the most complex species, they are undoubtedly the honeybee. So I am going to start by talking a little bit about honeybees because they're incredible. So honeybees live as one. They are almost like one organism. They live, all of them, everything they do is for the greater good of the whole. And that there is no one honeybee that could survive without another. The queen cannot survive without the colony. None of the workers can survive without the queen. So they are quite incredible. And this is something we could learn an awful lot from the honeybees. They're the ultimate socialists, they're the ultimate community because they work for the good of the whole. So they have a kind of, there's almost a spirit in the hive, and I don't know if anyone here keeps bees, but there is something very, very special about the relationship between human beings and honeybees. If you do it, and this is an oxymoron, but if you keep bees in a natural way, if you are a natural beekeeper, because there is no such thing as a natural beekeeper because it's not natural to keep bees. So if we go back a couple of 100,000 years, you know, bees, plants doing their own thing, humans popped into the picture, I don't know, I'm rubbish with timelines, but about 100,000 years ago. And first of all, we became bee hunters. We worked out that honey was tasty, it was good, it's nutritious, so we hunted. Then we became beekeepers. Then we evolved into bee managers. We started to manage and started to interfere. And what's happened today is we've become bee farmers, we farm bees. And bees are now like the battery chickens of the insect world. You probably, if you have heard about the problems with bees, you'll know about the problem in America with colony collapse disorder with millions of hives, not just millions of bees, but millions of hives being transported sort of hundreds of thousands of miles across the states to pollinate the almond orchards so that we can all have almonds. They are farmed. When people say, I don't know what's going on with the bees, you know, all these scientists are looking at bees, governments are putting millions of pounds into this to try and find out what's wrong with bees. What's the problem with bees? And it's us. We're the problem. You know, human beings, we are the problem. We have, I'm going to be covering this later, we have destroyed their habitat, and we poison them, and we mismanage them, in the case of honeybees. So, if you are interested in beekeeping, I know you said you're interested, then what I would suggest is that you look up, or you can contact, there's at the Natural Beekeeping Association in the UK, and there's a guy called Phil Chandler, who is, he's right up there as kind of the guy who is coordinating all of the different people, whether they are keeping bees biodynamically, or there's slow beekeeping now as part of the Slow Sundays movement, the slow food movement. Then there's all sorts of different types of hives, Warre hive, there's the Perone hive and the Top Bar hive. But all of these, you can find information about these in a fantastic forum on Phil Chandler's website, which is BioBees. So if you remember, or if you come across BioBees later, he's the guy to go and look for information about how to keep your honeybees. Now, I'm going to try and cover all the different problems that all these different bees are facing, but if I just start with honeybees, because they have their own separate problems, and because they are commercially viable, because they are worth however many billions to the world's economy, they have been factory farmed beyond, to within an inch of their lives, literally. And there are so many theories going around about what is killing them, this colony collapse disorder. In the States, they go to the hives, they open the hives, and the bees are gone. In the UK, they go and they open the hives and the bees are dead. You know, there's different things going on. They have their own parasites, their own viruses, they have varroa to contend with, they have all of these sort of honeybee diseases that I'm sure they wouldn't have if their immune systems had been allowed to develop and to remain healthy and strong. So that what's going on with the honeybees, apart from the varroa, is also affecting all the other bees, and everything I say to you today, I'm talking about bees, but this is just, it's everything. You know, I talk about bees, but what's going on with the bees on a micro level is going on a macro level throughout the world at the moment. So whenever I say, I'm thinking bees, but think everything here. So before, I'm going to come to bumblebees and solitary bees, and the only thing I really want to, because you may not have heard this, I want to talk to you about something that popped into my awareness a few weeks ago about honeybees that I thought was fascinating, and I haven't fully explored it, but it's worth passing on. There's a guy called John Harding, and he's a beekeeper. He's been a beekeeper for 30 years, and quite by accident he discovered, something happened in his life, he neglected his bees, he came back a few years later, and he found that some of his hives were thriving and others were dead. And anyway, at the same time he had been reading about a BBC sound engineer who had been listening to the vibrations inside hives. And what he discovered is that, and I'm not a physicist, so to go and look into this in detail later, the Earth, planet Earth, vibrates at 7.83 hertz. That's a given, that's the scientific fact. I think when nowadays when they send people up into space, because they started to become sick away from Earth's vibrations, they now send them up with little gadgets that reproduce that vibration for them. So that's how the planet vibrates. But if you have an underground stream or river, above where that underground stream or river, that's a good word actually, above this, I don't know, 400 feet up, the Earth vibrates at 250 hertz. That's quite a big leap, that's a huge leap. It also vibrates way up into the atmosphere from above the Earth, so that people think that that's where the migratory paths for birds are above these underground rivers. Not to be confused with ley lines. This is like geopathic stress lines here. And what this BBC sound engineer discovered when he put microphones into the beehives is that bees, honeybees, vibrate coincidentally at 250 hertz. So, if you imagine for all of these millions of years that the bees were sort of minding their own business and they were choosing hollows or holes in old trees and things, or locations, their choice of location, and they seem to be thriving. Then man comes along and he says, okay, actually we would like the box at the end of the garden. So he puts it at the end of the garden, and maybe, just maybe, they had chosen to build their colonies above these geopathic stress lines where they already had an Earth's vibration of 250 hertz. So they didn't have to work extra hard in the hive to sort of do their own thing. It was their environment was already a healthy environment for them. So if we put our hives in a place that doesn't vibrate at 250 hertz, these are the hives that this guy discovered were failing. And what he's done is he's been out and he's collected, I don't know, so in the last couple of years, 30 swarms. Every single swarm he has collected, he douses, has been above one of these hives. So that's just like a little, wow, that's interesting for anyone who's interested in bees. Maybe that is one of the problems, but it is only one of the problems. The pesticides companies love this problem because it's detracting from the pesticides issue, which I'll come to later. So, moving on from honeybees, I want to talk to you about bumblebees. And as I said, there are 24 different species in the UK. Only 6 of them are still common. So, I mean, I don't know if you know this, but these are all of our bumblebees. The top 6, or these 6 here, these are the ones that you'll find in your garden. If you think you've got lots of bees around and you don't think there's a problem, it's because you've got these bees in your garden, and your gardens are probably the last place on earth that they can go. And they're okay, they're surviving because they're generalist feeders, they're not specialists. They're not too fussy about what they're feeding on. So they're okay for the time being. The 6 at the bottom, and I'm not going to have time to go into this unfortunately today, but the 6 at the bottom are cuckoo bees. And they're exactly like cuckoos. They're kind of, they even look mean actually. I've got some photographs I'll show you later, but kind of what they do is they come out of hibernation a little bit later than the bee of their choice, their chosen host, and they lurk around the nest until there's an optimum time to go in, kill the queen, usually with a fight. Queen dies, they lay their eggs, and the host queen will then, her workers will rear the offspring of the cuckoo bee. So I could talk to you for about an hour just on cuckoo bees because their whole lifestyle is quite admirable. It's so difficult not to use the word evil, but I won't say that they're evil. That's nature, isn't it? So the rest of the bees on here are in big trouble. They're either in danger, they're on the biodiversity action plan list, they are about to become extinct, or one of them, 2 of them already extinct. So bumblebees are suffering as well. This is not just a honeybee problem. I'll keep this, if anyone wants to have a look at these later, feel free. So bumblebees, why are bumblebees important? Bees are the most important pollinators. We've got birds, we've got butterflies, we've got moths, we've got hoverflies, bats in some countries, but bees are responsible. Oh, wasps also are pollinators. People often wonder what the point of wasps is, and they are also pollinators. So bees pollinate, or are responsible for pollinating, 1/3 of all of food we eat. This includes meat. It includes meat because most of our animals that are bred for meat are reared on crops like alfalfa, which can only be pollinated by bees. So, very, very important as pollinators. It's recently been discovered by Reading University, who have done a lot of research on honeybee pollination, that actually it's the wild bees that are our most important pollinators, not the honeybees as was previously thought. That's something that's come out this year, in the last couple of months. And this is partly because of the decline in the honeybee numbers, but it's thought that actually wild bees are, because they're generalists, and because, I'll tell you why in a minute, they're out and about more, they are far more important. And bumblebees in particular, bumblebees are the only creatures on this planet, apart from us if we have electric toothbrushes and know how to do this carefully, that can pollinate our tomato crops. So, and our blueberries and our cranberries and lots of our other nightshades. If you imagine, it's really easy to know, everyone knows what a tomato flower looks like, a little yellow flower on the tomato plant. So the male flower doesn't want to give up its pollen, doesn't like to give up its pollen, really holding on tight to its pollen. Nothing else has a clue what to do about it but the bumblebee. The bumblebee has evolved to do this thing called buzz pollination. So the bumblebee comes along and it will take hold of the tomato plant and then it will vibrate its wings at 400 hertz. So what happens is like nature's tuning fork, and the whole flower will vibrate until all of a sudden it gives up its pollen onto the bumblebee. So that's how tomatoes are pollinated. That makes bumblebees commercially useful, which is awful for them, because human beings being who we are, we have started now to import whole colonies of bred bumblebees. It's a particular species, it's Bombus terrestris, which is one of the big six here, and crazily they're bred on the continent, or sometimes as far away as New Zealand and Australia, and this happens as well with for the American market. So in America and in the UK, we've got vast, you know, that our polytunnel and greenhouse cultures that we have, we are really into masses and masses. We like cherry tomatoes, don't we? 12 months of the year. So the bumblebees paying the price for this. These bumblebees are bred in conditions that are not wonderful, too confined. They become diseased, and they're brought into the UK to the polytunnels or to the greenhouses, where they're just sort of distributed at intervals along the great big polytunnels. They do their job, and then DEFRA can't allow them to escape because they are not native, even though they're one of our native species. So they have to be destroyed. When they've done their job, they're either drowned or they are frozen to death. So that's what happens. This doesn't happen in the organic tomato thing. This is just the non-organic. So on every level, this is wrong. This is wrong for the bees. And then what's even more alarming is that they're starting to bring disease in. So that the imported bees bringing disease in, and some of them escape, you know, which is great for them, but they do escape through the vents. And what they're doing is they're now taking this disease, a particular parasite, a very horrible parasite, out into the areas around the greenhouses and polytunnels. And what this parasite does is it doesn't damage them if they are commercially reared, because they're commercially reared bumblebees are fed, which is wrong anyway. But when they go out to forage, it takes away their ability, their innate ability to be able to tell that the flower they are visiting has still got nectar in it. So what these bees are doing because of this parasitic disease is they are going and visiting flowers again and again and again that have either don't carry nectar, or another bee has already taken the nectar, and there's nothing there, so they're starving to death. Now this disease is now affecting some of our native bees, and it's definitely a big problem. Some species in America, they think, are close to being wiped out because of this disease. So that's just wrong, all wrong. And this is because, again, we are interfering. This is this whole mankind trying to control, trying to manage, trying to use nature to get optimum results from something that is already absolutely perfect. So bumblebee is important, but tragically it's also now contributing to their demise. That's horrible stuff. I want to tell you some nice stuff about bumblebees now, because they're I don't know if you can have a favourite bee, but mine are bumblebees. And I spend hours and hours and hours watching bees. I sit on my garden steps just outside, or I sit on the patio, or I'll go down into the woods. And bumblebees don't want to sting you. Bumblebees are not aggressive at all. That you can be really, really close to them. Or on my garden steps, I've got a lavender plant that comes right up, and I have to brush the lavender plant out to get up to hang my washing out, and they sort of fly up and they come back. So for anyone with children, they're not aggressive. Bumblebees are not aggressive. If they're not happy with you, with what you're doing, they'll lift their middle leg up. And you think, okay. And actually, the first time I saw this, I was looking through. I carry this with me a lot. So I was looking through this, and I know it really sounds naive and crazy, but I thought it was waving at me. So, but it's not. It's telling you to back off. It doesn't like you in its space. And if it's really worried, if you don't back off, it'll lift a leg up on the other side as well, which is okay because they've got 6 legs. So, and then gradually put their legs down. So that's how you know if you are intruding too much in a bumblebee's space. Having said that, I just very, very quickly tell you a story about some bumblebees that I did make quite cross. On the banks of the River Severn, there's a particular new bumblebee on the block, and this bumblebee is called the tree bee, and it's just coming from Northern Europe quite recently, and it's very, very beautiful. It's like a little teddy bear. Can you see it? Yeah. So this is a very, very distinct bee. You cannot mistake this for anything else. It has a very orange thorax, and then its abdomen is black and its tail is white. And I kind of think I was the only person who hadn't seen one for the last few years. Everybody seems to be seeing tree bees except for me. And a friend of mine has a boat on the River Severn, and he found lots of tree bees. And we were walking along the River Severn one day, and I was walking along looking at a bee on the floor, and we heard what sounded like a swarm above us, and stood up, and there was this incredible thing, because in the hole of an old elder, there was 2 little holes in the bark of an old elder tree, was a tree bee nest. So it's like jackpot for tree bees, for bee geeks. Really, really exciting thing. And what the swarm was, which is most unusual because this is not what bumblebees do as a rule, was lots and lots of male bumblebees. And they'd been zipping up and down the path looking for a nest where the new princess, the virgin queens, were emerging this year, and they were waiting outside and doing this funny little buzzy dance. So it's like famous last words. I was standing right this far away from the hole of bumblebees, talking whilst we were filming. And this is great because bumblebees don't like stinging. Bumblebees are really, really gentle. And at that stage, something flew just into my hair and started to do this, like bees do in your hair, buzzing. And I just flicked a little bit, and I didn't hurt it. It got up off the ground, but the others went bonkers. And flew off and chased me down the riverbank and stung me. Boy, did they sting me, my ear, they got my ear. So, but I've since discovered that tree bees are more aggressive than any other bumblebees. So although I say to you, bumblebees don't want to sting you, have a little bit of respect, watch out for the legs going up, and don't go too close to the holes, the nest.
If they sting you, do they die?
Not bumblebees, no. No, fortunately, bumblebees will live to sting another day. Honeybees will die. Honeybees have a barb, bumblebees just have a point. So I just want to show you, before I go on to some of the other types of bees, one of the things I've done is I've started, I can't identify them quickly enough when they're flitting between plants. And they're either looking for nectar or they're looking for pollen. And they could be queens, they could be males, they could be workers, they could be variations on a species. Once you think you've started to learn how to identify bumblebees, it just keeps on getting more and more difficult. But this, one of the very easy ones to identify is this Bombus lapidarius, and it's the red-tailed bee. And it's, if you've seen a bee that looks like black velvet with a red velvet tail, that is the Bombus lapidarius, and it's one of the common bees. It's sort of like a low ground nester. And just so you can see, so I've started taking photographs when I see the bee, and then I take them and I've learned how to blow them up on the computer so I can get a better look and see what they are. I mentioned the cuckoo bees earlier. Are 6 common species of bumblebee each have a cuckoo that likes to come in and take over its nest. And I told you that they look mean. So this is the cuckoo. I'll pass these round. This is the cuckoo for the Bombus lapidarius. And it's kind of, they have more a shell-like body, more armour. They're more rigid, they're a bit bigger. But this one you can tell, if ever you see a bee with its wings looking all raggy, it's because it's coming to the end of its life, which this one is. So I pass these around and then you just have a little look. And another, this is possibly one of the most common bumblebees. This is a Bombus lucorum, a white-tailed bee. Sometimes you'll mistake it for the Bombus terrestris, which has a slightly buff-tailed, coloured tail. So this one, and this is on Phacelia. Phacelia is an incredible plant for bees. This is the cuckoo. You see how similar they look in this case. So this one, ever so similar, but I had this photograph on my computer for a couple of weeks before one day I looked at it and I thought, oh, it's not quite what I thought it was. And I suddenly realised that the white at the bottom goes into yellow, into a yellow stripe. And there is only one bee that does that, and it's the Bombus vestalis, which is the cuckoo bee, whereas this goes white to black. So very similar, I'll pass them around. I want to cover the life cycle of the bumblebee now, because it's very different to the honeybee. So you can think of honeybees as perennials, and bumblebees and solitary bees as annuals. And it's like with a life cycle, it's really difficult because it is a cycle. It's difficult to know where to come in. But if I come in the springtime, so if I come in, I'm just popped in February. So February, March time, what's happening is the new bumblebee queens are emerging from hibernation. You'll know that they're queens because they're huge and because they're sort of swishing along the ground like this. And what they're doing is they're prospecting for a nesting site. They're looking for somewhere to nest. They're also feeding, so it's terribly important that you have early, sort of February, March, April food, flowers, lots of nectar for them. They will find a site to build their nest, usually in a hole under the ground, up to 5 metres a tunnel they'll go through to get to the hole with the nest, or it'll just be on the surface if it's a particular type. They're like compost heaps and things like that. And then they start laying their eggs. So the way they lay their eggs is they form a little ball of nectar mixed with pollen, and they secrete a bit of wax from their abdomen, which turns it into a cocoon, and then they start laying their eggs into this. And they'll lay between 8 and 16 eggs into this little lump. And all the time they have to, just like birds, they have to brood the eggs, they have to keep them warm. So terribly important, they're backwards and forwards from the nest, non-stop at this stage. Keeping pollen for all the next eggs that they're going to be laying, but also nectar to keep themselves alive. And I've got, whenever I get stuck with, I do a lot of reading about bumblebees, and I watch anything I can watch on YouTube about bumblebees, and whatever I can find is out there, but nothing in the world beats, the personal experience when you're in your garden watching them, or when the universe realises that you're getting stuck on the life cycle, so it pops an experience into your life. And about last May, I had a visitor staying in my spare room, and he came down in the morning and he said, "Oh, you and your flipping bees, there's a nest in your spare room." So I said, "Oh, a nest, that's so exciting." So I ran upstairs, and just the most bizarre thing, there was a nest, and it was underneath the duvet. So lifted up the duvet, and first of all, you could smell honey. It's nectar. You smell this rawness, and the duvet was kind of yellow underneath. And I saw one bee, and it's a particular type of bee. It's the garden bee, Bombus lucorum. This is the bee that will very often nest in Wellington boots or lawn mowers or coat pockets or underneath the duvet. So this bee was, and this is how it was, sort of curled up over something, and when it went out of the window, I looked at the something, and the something was this little ball of pollen and nectar with a couple of eggs in it. But right next to it, that far away from it, was a perfectly formed, like the Winnie the Pooh honey pot, a little pot, and that was what the nectar was in. And what the bee does, what the queen bee does when she's establishing her nest, is she fills that with nectar so that on wet, rainy days, she can sit brooding her eggs and she can stick out her little tongue, her proboscis, and dip it into the honey pot to feed herself. So I mean, I kind of read a bit about this, but having seen it with my own eyes has made it all fall into place. So we've got the bees now. Oh, I had to close the window because this could have built into a colony of about 400 bumblebees, and it was a heart-rending decision for me to make. But they would have built up over the summer, and it wouldn't have been nice for them at all, or me, but particularly for them. So she kept bashing into the window for about 24 hours, but a nest of the same species established itself a couple of days later opposite my house, and I like to think that was her. So what happens next is the workers, these are the workers she's laying, they'll hatch out 28 days later, and they come out a little bit like baby birds. They're all wet, their wings are bedraggled, and they take a couple of days of sucking the nectar which is provided for them before they are ready to go out and forage. Then they will become workers or nursery maids or cleaners, or they'll be, as the nest builds, they recycle, bees recycle all of the little wax cocoons that they have. So the colony builds, and the colony will build and build until it's about the size maybe of a small football, and you'll have up to between 50 and at maximum about 400 bees. Then, these are all worker bees. Only worker bees have been laid till now. What the queen does then is she switches something. She switches some kind of switch, and she stops producing a chemical that she's produced for all that time that has suppressed the worker's bee from laying eggs. And it's meant that up until that moment, she hasn't laid any males or any daughter queens. So chemical switches off, and she starts to lay her first male eggs. So the males are hatching out, they come out and they're fully formed about 28 days later. When they leave the nest, they never come back. And the male bumblebee just basically spends its summer hanging out, foraging. It sleeps inside flowers at night time because it's got nowhere else to sleep. So if you have something like a snapdragon or a foxglove and you see a bee coming out very, very early in the morning, the chances are that it's a male bumblebee that's been sleeping, it's chosen it as a place to sleep overnight. And they wait, they choose, they start patrolling and waiting for the new queens to emerge. So we're now, say, depends on the species, but say July time, July and early August, the first new queens, the virgin queens, start to emerge. They go backwards and forwards to the nest. They're happy going backwards and forwards, and some of them will help to rear the rest of the new queens. At the same time, the existing workers start to lay eggs, and anarchy breaks out in the colony. This doesn't happen in a honeybee colony, but in the bumblebee colony, just all hell breaks out. And the queen is trying to gobble up all of these workers' eggs as quickly as possible. The workers tolerate this for a little while, and then just about the stage where the new queens are emerging and leaving, the workers lose it completely with the old queen, and they gang up on her and they sting her to death. They may continue with the colony for a little longer, but they're not fertile, and only a fertilised bee can produce new workers or new queens. Otherwise they just produce males. So colony dies out. All you've got left now is the new queens, the new males. They mate, the males die, and we're now just August. The queens, the new fertilised queens, will now go into hibernation, and they'll remain underground in hibernation for up to 6 months now, until the whole cycle starts again next February. So that's the cycle of the bumblebee. So much I could say, and I'm running out of time. So I'm going to touch on solitary bees because I want to leave time to talk to you about pesticides and other issues. 220 different species of solitary bee. Possibly the most important of these is a bee called the red mason bee, Osmia rupa, and you've probably come across bee houses, bee hotels. If you've seen these, I don't know if you've seen these, but this is how you can attract this particular bee to your garden. These bees, all of the solitary bees, they're really messy pollinators. So one solitary bee will do the same amount of work as 120 honeybees. That's how productive they are. They cover themselves with pollen. They don't kind of have the pollen sac thing going on that honeybees and that's, if you want to see a pollen sac, look at that for pollen sacs. That's a bumblebee carrying almost more pollen weight than its body weight. So these bees, the red mason bees, like to nest in holes. Solitary bees of all species either nest in holes in the wall, holes in wood, holes in the ground, holes in old stems of things like cow parsley or bamboo and things like that. This particular one is incredibly clever, the red mason, and if you put something like this on a south-west facing wall in your garden, or this was actually on the ground at the allotment, they say put them on walls, but this was great. And so you put it down, and what happens is you get the bees come along, and it's almost as if they're house hunting. So that they're going to buzz around into most of the different holes until they've chosen a hole that they like. And then they will deposit a lump of pollen, a lump of nectar, lay an egg, and then just this one particular bee has mandibles, these little, so it goes down into a muddy puddle and they pick up a little ball of mud and it goes and it blocks that cell off. Then it starts again, pollen, nectar, egg, mud, pollen, nectar, egg, mud, until it comes to the very end. And I'll pass, I think this is fairly stable, I'll pass this around. So this was May time that it did this. And they will keep, that's lots of little solitary bees. They're all operating on their own. This is all females that have come out, so they'll have come out of one of these in April, go and look for a mate, fertilised, start the whole cycle. They really are very basic. And then, yeah?
So is it one bee that's
one bee for each one. This could be a dozen bees.
One bee.
One bee, one hole.
One hole.
Yeah. And you often get a dozen different bees all around the same holes, which will make you think it's like a community, but it's not. They've just all found lots of holes that they all like. So if I pass this around, it's quite interesting to look at. So the solitary bees, again, hugely important as pollinators, and the only other one, because it's something that you might have seen, is if ever you're walking around, even now they're emerging, and you see tiny little holes in the ground in the earth, and they've got tiny little volcanoes, a little bit like the most miniature molehill you've ever seen in your life. That's the Andrena solitary bees, that's the mining bees, and they're doing something very similar to this, but they're doing it in the ground. You've got leaf cutters that do the same thing as this, only they nibble a little semicircle off the edge of a rose leaf, and they'll carry the leaf and they line their cell with the leaf like wallpaper, and they do exactly the same as what the red mason bees do, only they block each cell off with mud. And I put something else passed around. This is again, so if you were me and you were a bee geek, you'd be thinking, oh, I wish I could see inside these cells. And a friend of mine, this is kind of a sad story, but it's also interesting. A friend of mine who I'd given a bee hotel to phoned me up and said, Bridget, there's a woodpecker at my bee hotel. And she had a bee hotel that I'd stuffed lots of these in, lots of little bamboo sticks in. So she got a baby woodpecker pecking in, eating the larvae and the pollen stores and things. And so I suggested she put some chicken wire or something over it. But before she had a chance to do that, the parents came along. And the parents took these out, pulled them out, smashed them on the ground, and opened them up so that the baby could get at what's inside, which is terribly sad, but it means I can show you what's inside. And you can see, I'll pass it around with my magnifying glass, I've always got with me, and you can have a look and you can see what's going on inside here. And there are a couple of little bits of pollen, a few little sort of grubs around the edge as well, so just worth looking at. Oh, and the other thing I'll pass around, this is from a bumblebee nest that I found on the Malvern Hills a couple of weeks ago that a badger had dug out. So these bees, they have their own predators as well. Nature, it's not just human beings. It's a miracle that a bumblebee survives to the full. They have parasites, they have badgers, they have foxes, They compete with each other for nesting sites. Anarchy breaks out. So many things can go wrong. But this is the inside. I told you about the little honey pots. So just pass these around and have a little look at these as well. So I want to come on to the problems now. And I'm going to skip past some of them. I'm going to say that climate change is a problem. Mobile phones, I believe, are a problem. The amount of pollution that we're putting out there, it's one of the problems. You know, it is affecting their navigation abilities or their immune systems, as it is with lots of human beings. But the two biggest problems of all are, without doubt, habitat loss and pesticides. So habitat loss is tangible, we can see it, it's obvious. We've lost 97% of all of our wildflower meadows and grasslands in the last 70 years. So since the end of the Second World War, 97 is actually creeping up to 98%. So gone. You know, that's the long. If you add to that the woodlands and the hedgerows that have been lost, what was a wonderful, diverse habitat for bees and all other creatures. And remember what I said at the beginning. Whatever I'm saying to you about bees applies to everything else that's going on. So this is losing habitat for foraging, habitat for nesting, habitat for hibernating, and habitat for mating. It's all going. I mean, the causes of this are, you probably know, I don't need to tell you, that this is urban sprawl, industrial agriculture, the monocrops that are being planted out in the countryside. So it's not surprising that bees are struggling with loss of habitat, as are all invertebrates. Invertebrate loss means that we're losing our farmland birds as well. So this is a massive, massive problem, the habitat loss. The second problem is pesticides, is we're poisoning the bees. And what's bonkers is that we've been warned about this. We were warned by Rudolf Steiner 80 years ago. He said if we carry on treating our wildlife the way we are now, if we carry on with the type of agriculture we're using, if I come back in 100 years' time, I will be surprised if there are still bees around. So that was 80 years ago. So he's kind of spot on if we don't stop. And there was Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, back in the 60s. So we've been warned. Pesticides, you know, the amount of pesticides you might find in a dead bee could be up to 22 different types of chemicals when they do a sort of take an autopsy, a biopsy, or whatever, of a dead bee. But I'm just going to focus on one particular pesticide today, and it's the newest, nastiest one, and it's called neonicotinoid. It's a new family of pesticides called neonicotinoids, and there are lots of nasty things about them, but they're systemic, and systemic means that when they're put on the seed, they treat the seed, but they get into the vascular system of the plant. So when the plant grows through the vascular system, they go into the roots, the stem, the leaves, the flowers, they're in the pollen and they're in the nectar. And they are persistent, they persist. So they stay here. You can't wash them off. This is not something you can wash. We need to be worried about this as well, because all of our, in this country, all of the flax, all of the sunflower, all of the rape seed, they're all treated with neonicotinoids. In particular one called imidacloprid. So they're systemic, they're in the plant, that's not good, and then the effect they have is horrible because they are neurotoxins. So they get into the nervous system of the bee, and they do this in small doses. They call this sublethal, as if it's okay. So sublethal doses. So each time the bee goes to the plant and it takes the nectar or the pollen away from this plant, it's sort of building up residues of this in itself, but it's also going and taking it back to the hive in the case of the honeybee, or into the colony with the bumblebees. So taking all of this nasty, nasty stuff back builds up, and first of all they get leg tremors, they get wing tremors, and then they just can't find their way back to the nest. This has been banned in, either banned or restricted in Germany, Italy, Slovenia, but our government have done nothing about this, and I just want to, I was looking at it and I was thinking, government neonicotinoid, what are they doing about it? And I found this is from the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology, and this is dated January last year. And because I wondered if they knew about them. I thought they, you know, you think, gosh, if they knew, this is typical. We all think, or naively, if they knew about it, they'd do something about it, or it's in the shop, so it must be safe. So this is what they've written here: neonicotinoids. These are a family of insecticides that disrupt insect neurological functions. A few neonicotinoids are highly toxic to honeybees. They are systemic, which means they are absorbed and transported throughout a plant. This can improve pest control efficiency. However, bees and other pollinators may ingest pesticide residues when feeding on treated plants. Unlike contact pesticides, this may occur over several days or longer if contaminated pollen and nectar are stored in the hive, thus increasing cumulative pesticide exposure. This is not addressed in the current pesticide assessment process. The European Food Safety Authority is considering an improved evaluation process. If this is accepted, neonicotinoids would be reassessed within the next 10 years. So that's what our government are doing about the neonicotinoid problem. Neonicotinoids, by the way, are manufactured by a company called Bayer, B-A-Y-E-R. Look them up. You know, and the other pesticides, Syngenta, Monsanto. The whole nothing being done about it, I think, is all because at the top level somewhere there are these multinationals. Look out for these products. Ask in your garden centres if the manager or if someone knows where the seeds have come from. Say, have these seeds been treated with neonicotinoids? Have these plants been come from seeds that have been treated with neonicotinoids? Be like you have been, hopefully, with with the whole free-range egg thing. Because we're so British and we're so, you know, we tend to go into a shop and say, excuse me. Do you know if these are treated with neonicotinoids, because they're not very good for bees? And then if someone says, oh, I don't know, you say, oh, okay, thank you. But you mustn't. You must really, really go in and sort of insist that you find out, because someone somewhere will eventually have to go away and ask some questions. And when lots of people go in, instead of just fobbing you off, they will take them off the shelves. Provado, P-R-O-V-A-D-O, Provado is the non-commercial. Most of this is happening commercially, but for you, if you did ever, if you were ever tempted to buy this product that's called Ultimate Bug Killer, no, please don't. But please go and get your sort of market gardens or people to take it off the shelves, because that's the nastiest of all. Ultimate Bug Killer. And golf courses and anything that treats vine weevils, soil treatments, lawn treatments, all got neonicotinoids in them. Huge problem. So, yeah.
There's a petition.
Yes, thank you. Yes, okay. So a number of petitions. Neil's Yard have set up a campaign called Be Lovely, and if you look up Neil's Yard or look up Be Lovely, you'll find a petition to ask our government to ban the neonicotinoids in this country, and they need to be banned, not restricted. So really, really good thing. That's another thing you can do, is to sign the petition as well as going in and lobbying these people. I think I've got 2 minutes, so I'm just going to finish. I could give you a list of plants to plant for bees, but you can find that yourselves in books and on the internet. All I want to say is whatever you do, make it organic in your garden. Be a messy gardener. Plant a succession of plants that will flower, that are nectar-rich and pollen-rich from February through till November. No point in you just having huge amounts of lavender in the summer if there's nothing for them when they emerge and nothing for them to take into hibernation. If in doubt, plant something blue. BC blue. They adore all of the Mediterranean plants, all of the herbs. Caviar and champagne for bees would be borage and viper's bugloss. And as I mentioned earlier, they love phacelia. Anything wild, they adore the wildflowers, the vetches, the clovers, dandelions they love, dead nettles, And trees. Don't forget permaculture. You know, be a permaculture person or grower, because if you have a forest garden type garden, you've got trees, you've got shrubs, you've got sort of perennials, you've got annuals, you've got a bit of everything. I'm trying to think what else would be. Again, I said pollen and nectar rich. That's something you can get lists of. And if you wanted a website, anyone who's writing our websites, Foxleas, FOXLEAS.com, I think, is one of the best wildlife gardening websites, and one of the best books, if you haven't come across it, just for organic gardening, wildlife gardening, is No Nettles Required. And it's absolutely fabulous. And it talks about, in one of the first, in fact this is a good thing for me to end on. This is just a little passage, where are we? Here. Think of your garden as a supermarket and try to think like the manager. To keep your customers, that is birds, frogs and hedgehogs, and bees obviously, happy, you need a constant supply of a wide range of high quality products. Except, unlike Tesco or Asda, this is a magic supermarket where the shelves are miraculously restocked every morning with fresh provisions, without you having to lift a finger. To pursue the analogy, imagine for one moment a garden where the war with plant pests has finally been won. This is the gardening equivalent of Tesco at closing time on Christmas Eve, with nothing left except some mouldy sprouts and a few tins of anchovies. You can no more expect any satisfied customers in a war zone such as this than you would expect if the first floor of your house to survive the destruction of the ground floor. Your garden, with only a very modest assistance, is one giant larder stuffed with every possible kind of food for the thousands of different kinds of predators that, given half a chance, would love to live there. All they need is to be allowed to get on with it. So just let nature take its course. Trust that what nature is already doing in your garden and out there and out in the rest of the, I don't know, the United Kingdom and the world, nature is already perfect. So just think everything, don't intervene, just stop intervening. Go on a permaculture course, check out the Foxleas website, have a look at books like this, and go out and sit and watch the bees in your garden and start to get to know them, start to make friends with them. And then I truly believe once you start to make friends with them, you will love them so much that you wouldn't be able to bear for what's happening to continue happening to them. So I've got to stop now, but thank you so very much for listening. Yeah. So